Have you ever wondered why so many men spend years worrying about the size of their penis, their erection strength, or whether they can satisfy a woman, while science quietly reveals a completely different truth about what women actually desire? It is one of the biggest hidden gaps in men's health, the difference between what men think women want and what women actually choose in real life. And this confusion creates a silent storm in the minds of millions of men, especially those over 50, who already feel pressured by changes in erection quality, testosterone, and sexual confidence. The question is simple but powerful: are your fears based on reality, or on myths that were never meant to guide your intimate life? When you grow up hearing jokes, comparisons, locker room myths, and exaggerated media fantasies, your brain starts forming a distorted image of what is normal in sex, erection strength, and penis size. Those myths slowly shape beliefs, beliefs shape insecurities, and insecurities shape performance. Many older men walk into intimacy already feeling defeated, thinking their body no longer measures up, when in truth they are comparing themselves to a fantasy that never reflected women's real preferences in the first place. Science shows that desire and reality often move in different directions. Women may fantasize about one thing, but long-term satisfaction, comfort, pleasure, and emotional connection lead them to choose something completely different. And here is where the problem begins. When a man believes his penis is not enough, or that aging has weakened his erections beyond repair, his body reacts. Anxiety pulls blood flow away from the penis. Stress hormones interrupt arousal. Confidence drops, desire fades, and intimacy becomes a battlefield instead of a place of connection. But what if the real issue is not your erection or your penis, but the story you've been told? What if understanding the truth could bring back the confidence you thought was gone? You have probably felt this at least once, even if you never admitted it out loud. The moment of doubt. The silent question. The fear that your partner secretly wishes for something different. That fear can shape your entire experience as a man. But you deserve clarity, not confusion. You deserve to know what science actually says, and how this knowledge can transform your confidence, your sexual performance, and your relationship with your own body. Before we continue, tell me in the comments if you've ever felt pressured by myths about penis size or sexual performance, and make sure to like this video and check if you're already subscribed so you don't miss the next steps of this conversation that can genuinely change how you see your own masculinity. And from here, we move naturally into the deeper science behind these misunderstandings. When you look past the noise of cultural myths and exaggerated expectations, what science actually reveals about female desire is far more grounded, practical, and reassuring than most men imagine. Research consistently shows that women separate fantasy from reality in ways many men never consider. A fantasy is a form of entertainment, a mental image shaped by curiosity or imagination. Reality, however, is about comfort, emotional connection, trust, and physical pleasure that feels good, not painful, intimidating, or overwhelming. And these differences matter, especially for men over 50 who may already feel pressure from changes in erection strength, penis sensitivity, or overall sexual confidence. Studies from major universities around the world show a striking pattern: when women are asked in private, without social pressure, without judgment, and especially without a partner listening, the vast majority report preferring an average-sized penis for real sexual encounters. Not the larger-than-life images portrayed in media. Not the unrealistic proportions men often compare themselves to. What they choose in real relationships is centered around how the experience feels, not on how it looks. Comfort, ease of movement, emotional presence, and the ability to enjoy intimacy without tension or pain consistently rank higher than physical extremes. This gap between fantasy and reality becomes even clearer when researchers measure not only what women say but how they behave. In anonymous surveys, when asked about long-term partners, women overwhelmingly prefer qualities linked to emotional safety, communication, and physical compatibility over size. And compatibility has nothing to do with being bigger, it has everything to do with being responsive, attentive, and confident enough to stay present during intimacy. These qualities create trust, which allows arousal to build naturally. Trust regulates breathing, increases vulnerability, and encourages deeper stimulation, factors that matter far more than the dimensions men obsess over. For many men over 50, this scientific perspective is liberating. It removes the pressure to perform like someone in their 20s or to match unrealistic standards that were never based on real female preference in the first place. As the body changes with age, slower erections, reduced sensitivity, fluctuations in libido, it becomes essential to understand what actually drives female satisfaction. The truth is that most women value rhythm, connection, pacing, and communication. They prefer a partner who understands their body, reads their signals, and adjusts in real time. These traits grow stronger with age, maturity, and experience, which means older men often have natural advantages younger men lack. When men internalize the science instead of the myth, something powerful happens. Anxiety decreases. Tension fades. Erections become easier because blood flow is no longer competing with stress hormones. Pleasure becomes more accessible, and intimacy becomes deeper, more relaxed, and more fulfilling. And with that shift, a man begins to see that the gap between desire and reality is not a measurement problem, it is a misunderstanding that can be corrected with clarity and awareness. And once you understand what truly shapes attraction and satisfaction, the entire landscape of sexual confidence begins to change, opening space for a new approach to intimacy that aligns with real human connection. As men move through life, especially after the age of 50, insecurities often take root not because of their actual sexual ability, but because of the stories they've absorbed over decades. Cultural myths, jokes about penis size, and exaggerated portrayals of sex shape the mind long before a man even understands his own body. These messages settle quietly into the subconscious, creating a distorted lens through which he evaluates every intimate moment. And when changes related to aging begin, slower erections, less spontaneous arousal, or shifts in sensitivity, those old myths can magnify the smallest concern into a much larger fear. What many men don't realize is that these insecurities rarely emerge from physical limitations. They come from internal narratives built on comparison. A man may look at another's confidence, at media images, or at fictional expectations and assume something is wrong with him. In reality, the comparison itself becomes the problem. The human brain is naturally wired to protect ego and identity. When a man believes he is lacking, the brain shifts into threat mode. Stress hormones increase. And those hormones directly interfere with erection quality and sexual performance. What began as a psychological concern becomes a physical experience, reinforcing the fear even more. This creates a cycle older men know well: the moment doubt enters, arousal becomes fragile. A slight distraction or moment of pressure causes the erection to weaken. The mind interprets this as proof of inadequacy, and the cycle tightens again. Yet biologically, nothing is broken. The penis is highly reactive to emotional states, and a single moment of insecurity can redirect blood flow in seconds. That is why confidence plays such a central role in sexual performance. The body follows the mind, not the other way around. Another factor is that many men were never taught to see intimacy as a shared experience. Instead, they were conditioned to believe they must perform, as if sex were a test they must pass every time. This pressure builds even more intensely as men age. Instead of adapting to their body's natural changes, they try to force it to behave as it did at 25. And when it doesn't, shame appears. But the truth is that performance-based thinking is the very thing that interrupts pleasure. Women don't want performance, they want presence, connection, and responsiveness. The tragedy is that so many men feel alone in these struggles. They assume they are the only ones who worry about size, stamina, or erection strength. They imagine younger men don't face these issues, when in reality, research shows that anxiety is one of the most common causes of erectile difficulties at any age. But older men often carry the added weight of believing they should know better, which isolates them further. When a man understands that his insecurities are learned, not biological, he begins reclaiming control over his intimate life. And that shift in mindset is powerful. When a man stops comparing himself to unrealistic standards and starts recognizing his real strengths, experience, emotional intelligence, sensitivity, and the ability to connect, his confidence begins to stabilize. Stress decreases. Erections become more reliable. Pleasure deepens naturally. Age stops being a limitation and becomes an advantage. And the myths that once shaped insecurity lose their influence, clearing the way for a new understanding of sex, desire, and self-worth that finally aligns with reality. As men age, the expectations they carry into the bedroom often become heavier than any physical change happening in their bodies. The pressure to maintain strong erections, consistent desire, and youthful performance can quietly erode confidence long before anything is actually wrong physiologically. And when these expectations collide with the realities of aging, slower arousal, more gradual erections, or a need for different types of stimulation, many men internalize the experience as failure instead of recognizing it as a natural transition. This emotional weight, not the body itself, becomes one of the biggest barriers to satisfying intimacy. Psychologically, unrealistic expectations activate the same stress pathways involved in fear and danger. When a man enters intimacy worried about disappointing his partner, his brain sends signals that reduce blood flow to the penis and increase tension throughout the body. The heart rate elevates, not from arousal, but from anxiety. The muscles tighten, breathing becomes shallow, and arousal can quickly collapse under the pressure. These reactions are not voluntary, they are hardwired survival responses triggered by internal self-judgment. What the man interprets as a physical problem is often a consequence of emotional overload. What complicates this even more is that most men assume women share the same expectations. They imagine that their partner expects perfection, rigid erections, or a performance that mirrors the idealized scenes men have been exposed to since young adulthood. But the truth is completely different. Women tend to value closeness, attentiveness, and communication far more than the mechanical aspects men obsess about. They are far more concerned with how the experience feels emotionally than with whether a man's body responds exactly the same way every time. Yet men rarely realize this, and the gap between assumption and reality becomes a source of unnecessary pressure. As this pressure builds, men often try to compensate by pushing harder, rushing arousal, forcing erection strength, or trying to recreate the experiences of their 20s through sheer determination. But the body does not respond well to force. Erections rely on relaxation, blood flow, and a calm mind. The more a man tries to push through anxiety, the more resistant his body becomes. This leads to a spiral where each difficult experience reinforces the belief that something is wrong, even though the real issue is the expectation itself. This disconnect can also strain relationships. When a man withdraws out of embarrassment or fear of repeating a disappointing moment, his partner may interpret the withdrawal as lack of interest. This misunderstanding can create emotional distance, even though both partners want closeness. In reality, the body is simply reacting to an invisible weight that has nothing to do with desire and everything to do with pressure. Understanding this dynamic is key to breaking the cycle. When men recognize that changes in arousal patterns are not signs of failure but signs of evolution, they gain space to reconnect with their body in a healthier way. Instead of focusing on performance, they begin noticing sensation, rhythm, and connection. Instead of anticipating disappointment, they begin allowing pleasure to build naturally. And with this shift, the male body often responds with greater ease, because the psychological barrier that once interrupted arousal begins to fade. By separating pressure from performance, men rebuild confidence not by force, but by alignment with what intimacy truly is, a shared experience, not a test. What truly matters for intimacy, pleasure, and long-term connection is far more nuanced than the narrow expectations many men carry. When researchers study what actually leads to sexual satisfaction in real relationships, one finding appears again and again: pleasure is built through rhythm, communication, emotional safety, and responsiveness, not through physical extremes or constant performance. Women consistently report that the most fulfilling experiences come from partners who pay attention, who read their reactions, who adjust the pace naturally, and who stay mentally present rather than trapped in self-judgment. These are qualities that grow stronger with age, not weaker. For men over 50, this truth can be transformative. Your body may have changed, but your capacity to create deep, satisfying intimacy often increases. Experience teaches patience. Maturity strengthens emotional intelligence. With time, men tend to become more aware of their partner's signals, more capable of slowing down, and more attuned to the subtleties of connection. This shift, not a physical trait, is what creates the kinds of intimate experiences most women value. When a man allows desire to build gradually, when he focuses on sensation instead of pressure, he taps into a level of intimacy that younger, more anxious men rarely reach. Biologically, pleasure is a dance between relaxation and stimulation. For women especially, arousal builds through trust and steady engagement. Sudden intensity, force, or rushed contact often blocks pleasure rather than enhancing it. This is why average size, slower progression, and consistent stimulation align more closely with female physiology. It's not about the visual fantasy, it's about the experience unfolding at a pace that lets the body open fully. And when a man understands this, his confidence stops depending on the size of his penis or the immediacy of his erection and begins resting on his ability to create comfort and anticipation. Many men also underestimate how much emotional tone influences sexual experience. A calm, grounded presence can increase arousal far more than a powerful erection alone. Women respond strongly to a partner who is focused, reassuring, and engaged with the moment. Even the way a man breathes, the way he touches, the way he listens to subtle cues can heighten intimacy more than any physical attribute. These are skills older men excel at, precisely because they are less driven by impulse and more guided by connection. When men shift their attention from performing to participating, something changes in their physiology as well. Performance anxiety drops. Blood flow becomes more stable. Erections grow more naturally because there is no internal force working against them. Instead of chasing a standard set by unrealistic cultural narratives, the man begins aligning with the way real intimacy works. This alignment produces deeper satisfaction for both partners, reduces pressure, and fosters a sense of closeness that lasts beyond the moment. By embracing what truly creates pleasure rather than what mythology says should create it, men discover a form of sexuality that is richer, steadier, and far more fulfilling. Intimacy becomes less about proving something and more about experiencing something together. And in that shift, men often find that their body responds with more confidence, their partner responds with more openness, and the entire experience transforms into something more meaningful than the mechanical definitions of performance that dominated their earlier years. As men move deeper into their 50s and 60s, many begin to wonder whether their best intimate years are behind them. Yet science paints a completely different picture. While the body does undergo natural shifts in erection patterns, testosterone rhythms, sensitivity, and recovery time, these changes do not signal the end of a man's sexual capability. Instead, they open the door to a new phase of intimacy, one built on awareness, adaptability, and a deeper understanding of how the male body truly works. Confidence at this stage does not come from replicating youth but from embracing the strengths that come with age and experience. One of the key factors that older men often overlook is that sexual performance becomes less dependent on raw physical responsiveness and more tied to overall health habits. circulation, stress management, diet, sleep quality, and even emotional stability have a profound impact on erection strength. In many cases, what a man interprets as age-related decline is actually the cumulative effect of lifestyle patterns that can still be corrected. The penis is an extension of vascular health, and improvements in cardiovascular function often translate directly into stronger, more reliable erections. Even small adjustments, more consistent movement, better hydration, reduced alcohol intake, or improved sleep routines can create noticeable improvements in sexual function. Another advantage older men possess is emotional maturity. Younger men often struggle with self-consciousness, impatience, and a lack of communication skills that interfere with intimacy. Older men, however, tend to be more attentive, more patient, and more capable of building the kind of emotional environment that enhances arousal for both partners. Women frequently report that intimacy with a mature partner feels safer, more grounded, and more satisfying because the experience is not rushed or driven by insecurity. This emotional depth supports physical performance as well, reducing anxiety and creating space for erections to develop naturally. Science also shows that men who remain sexually active as they age tend to maintain stronger erectile function over time. The body adapts to use, blood vessels stay more flexible, nerve sensitivity remains sharper, and psychological comfort increases. This means that intimacy should not be avoided due to fear of occasional difficulty. Instead, staying engaged, through touch, connection, stimulation, and exploration, helps maintain healthy sexual function. Many men find that once pressure is removed and confidence begins to rebuild, their body responds with a surprising level of vitality. What truly transforms sexual confidence at this stage is understanding that intimacy does not depend on achieving perfect erections every time. Women do not expect consistency, they expect connection. They want a partner who is present, communicative, and engaged, not a man who silently battles with fear while trying to appear unaffected. When men allow themselves to be honest, when they stop interpreting every fluctuation as failure, the entire experience shifts. Erections improve, pleasure deepens, and intimacy becomes something shared rather than performed. With this awareness, men begin reclaiming their sense of masculinity from a more grounded place. They realize they are not losing their sexual identity, they are evolving it. And in this evolution, many discover a level of confidence and satisfaction far greater than what they experienced in youth, not because their body is the same, but because their understanding of intimacy is finally aligned with reality. When men finally understand the real difference between desire and reality, something inside them begins to shift. The tension that once controlled their intimate experiences slowly loosens, and the pressure to meet unrealistic standards fades into the background. What emerges in its place is a quieter, stronger kind of confidence rooted not in comparison, but in clarity. Women are not searching for the fantasies men fear they must live up to, they want connection, comfort, chemistry, and a partner who knows how to be present. This truth alone has the power to rebuild a man's sense of identity, especially for those over 50 who have spent years believing their worth depended on performance. Science continues to show that what truly shapes sexual satisfaction is consistency, communication, and emotional availability. These qualities deepen with age, and that is why so many men discover that their most meaningful intimate experiences happen later in life. When the mind is free from the noise of comparison, the body can respond with more stability. Erections become less fragile, arousal becomes more natural, and intimacy becomes a place of exploration rather than pressure. A man who understands his partner's rhythms, who listens, who adjusts, who stays connected, that man brings far more satisfaction than any fictional ideal ever could. And this understanding transforms more than the bedroom. It affects confidence, posture, mood, and the way a man carries himself. When he stops believing he is competing with an imaginary standard, he steps into his own identity with more certainty. This shift radiates outward, he becomes more affectionate, more relaxed, more expressive, and more able to give and receive pleasure without fear. That ease creates a stronger bond with his partner, making intimacy not just a physical experience, but an emotional one that reinforces trust and closeness over time. This is the real secret many men never discover: desire grows with authenticity. Women feel safer, more aroused, and more connected when they sense that a man is comfortable with who he is. Not perfect. Not performative. Present. When you understand this dynamic, you stop chasing illusions and start embracing the version of yourself that women are truly drawn to. And in this space, intimacy becomes deeper, richer, and far more satisfying than the narrow definitions men are taught to value. If you arrived this far, it means the message resonated with you. Leave a comment saying something simple like "This message was for me, so I know you are here with me until the end." And if this conversation helped you see yourself differently, consider subscribing to the channel so you can keep receiving content that supports your confidence and your health as a man. A like on this video also helps the channel reach more men who need this clarity. And if you feel ready to continue this journey, there is another video right here that expands on everything we talked about today, so let the next step unfold naturally and come with me for what comes next.